is that the toughest part of these reviews? Is that is one of the parts I like the most of the fountain review. It's like viewers don't know this, but we spent like half an hour trying to figure out the right music because Calvin's like wrong mode. It's really funny.
It's funny because I feel like we actually spent longer on this one.
I think you're probably right. Right, and welcome to Now This Is Podcasting. I'm your host, Connor. I have my co-host, Jaden.
Yee.
And former guest, Calvin.
Thanks for having me back.
And we're going to continue our series on Denis Villeneuve films with Prisoners. So I actually think, first of all, this film is odd in a way because we talked about Enemy last time. And this film was actually released before Enemy, despite being filmed after it. And I also think it's interesting because they were both released alongside each other at the Toronto Film Festival.
Yep.
Which is just odd to me how that works. Like a director who can manage like two properties at the same time, I think is kind of amazing.
Yeah, I can't even imagine trying to... There's a reason why filmmakers don't make as many movies as actors is because they're in part of every step of the creative process, or a significant number of them. So to be... He was talking about like going on a plane and like he finished editing Enemy and then he got on a plane to go shoot for Prisoners and then come back and work on the sound mixing for Enemy like within a week. Like that's like,
and he was like, Jake, you're coming along with me. Let's go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like that's probably why he like, well, for convenience sake, I'm just gonna recast you over here.
There's actually Ryan Gosling actually auditioned for the part of Loki, which Jake Gyllenhaal eventually got. But I wonder if maybe there's some of that like continuity between like the director and his actor. He was like, maybe I'll just drag you along for this one.
I know that the premise of Loki is what you really wanted to make Anthony an enemy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Or maybe it's just all for the airline miles.
What if Enemy is taking place in the subconscious of Detective Loki? No? Okay.
I'm just thinking he's very like, misogynistic.
So just little stats on the film. This had a budget of $46 million, which we couldn't find the budget for Enemy, but this is clearly a bigger budget film. This is more a conventional film. It was a much broader U.S. release than Enemy was, and it made $122 million, which is like respectable, I think, for your first kind of big, because this was technically his first like English language film that he released. In a theatrical release. So it's pretty respectable.
Yeah.
And the fact that this dude's going to do Dune later, which is supposed to be an amazingly epic movie with a monstrous
huge
budget.
Yeah.
It must have such a big budget and the studio's so worried about it. That's why they continued to delay it for like over a year.
Yeah.
Because they need the box office for it. So
yeah, and I actually think it's only the first half. I think it's technically Dune Part 1.
Yeah, it is. There's supposed to be Part 2.
Yeah, I think the hope is that it's so well received that they can then make a Part 2, which would be tragic if they can't because it's an amazing novel. I would love to see the whole thing. Like,
I mean, it looks stunning.
I would love to see the whole thing realized on film, but if it's only Part 1, I would be very sad if there's not a Part 2. But yeah, it was written by Aaron Gusakowski, who has also written for that show on HBO Max, Raised by Wolves. Have you guys heard of that one?
No.
It's directed by Ridley Scott, who's like, I assume 100 years old now. I don't know.
We
how
looked it up actually. I think right.
He's like 80.
He's over 80.
Yeah, it's wild,
and
right?
He's making movies still.
Yeah, I don't love that show, but it has a pretty big, I think, like sci-fi cult following. It's an odd show, but it's this is not just some like nobody writer. Like he's continued to do stuff that's successful. So yeah.
And he based it on Edgar Allan Poe's short story, The Telltale Heart, or he based his short story on Poe's short story and then adapted it into
that's interesting.
A screenplay. Yeah. And so in The Telltale Heart, it's this narrator who's going crazy, but and he ends up killing a man who's in his care, but he's going through all of this painstaking effort to tell the reader that he's not crazy, but he's hallucinating, hearing the old man's heart still beating underneath the floorboard. So I thought it was going to be really interesting bringing the idea of an unreliable narrator into this film. they kept some parts of like how he brought in this short story he brought in the detectives, and they were talking because they had heard someone had reported hearing noise in the night before from the man dying, and he was talking about how they can't hear him. I was acting all calm, and so we've obviously have a couple of those instances, but I
don't think that plays into this movie very much.
I
at
know.
all.
I'm kind of underwhelmed in what he could have done with the source material and where it ultimately goes. But yeah, I think it's a great landscape for characters here.
I think as far as the genre goes, I think it's a really good version of like your abduction crime thriller detective solving the case. I think it's a smart version of that film. I think in other hands it could have come across as maybe a little more campy or played out, and I think some of the detective work is a little played out in this. Kind of comes too easy. But that kind of brings me to my next question: is I don't really think this is a film about the actual like plot points in the narrative of this story. So if you this to me is more of a character study. It's the characters that are interacting with this narrative around them. Like if you watch Rocky, that movie is about Rocky winning the fight. That's what the movie is about.
He doesn't win.
Okay, whatever, Rocky 2. Whatever fucking movie he wins, I guess. I don't know. But I'm saying those movies are... the characters exist to drive the plot of that movie. The characters in this film do not exist to drive the plot of this film, which to me is why I think of this as more of a character study. It's more about the characters interacting with this story, that this conflict that's existing around them. They aren't necessarily driving it to like this film is not about like a means to an end. I think it's about seeing these actors portray these characters in a really great way on screen, and that's what I think it's about. Do you guys agree with that, or do you think this is like a plot driven film?
I think it's kind of plot driven.
Okay.
I think it's like when you said about it's like a crime movie. I just feel like it's a really long episode of like Law and Order SVU. That's how I feel about this movie.
Really?
Yeah.
I think it's much more well done than an episode of SVU.
I mean, it's like a very well done episode.
Okay, very well done.
Okay, yeah. Like it's like as good as that could possibly be.
Yeah.
Okay, no,
but it
yeah,
still follows the same plot structure.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah, it's I have no Villeneuve SVU. Dun dun dun.
Okay. I don't necessarily disagree with that. This movie is not interesting because of its plot. This movie is interesting because of the characters.
Yeah, which I think there's some fantastic acting in this movie.
Right.
I think a lot of it comes from supporting characters.
Yeah, but I'd sum this film up as the world of trouble and affliction.
Right. Okay.
That's I think, without tipping my hand of what I ultimately think of the entire film as a whole, that's how I would describe it right now.
I would describe this as a crime thriller that kind of blurs the lines between right and wrong, moral, immoral. I think you have a very godly, God-fearing man is one of your kind of main characters in this, and he's going to have to cross these lines. You have a detective who's going to have to cross some lines here. So yeah, I just say it's a kind of a back and forth between moral and immoral. Like what lines are you willing to cross is kind of how I describe this.
Yeah, I mean that's one big question in it for sure. I mean, would you do what he does? I mean, that's something you process in your inner mind, like in your thoughts. Like while watching this, like holy shit, if I was in his shoes, and I thought this was like the answer, like how far would I go? I don't know. This movie's okay.
Yeah.
I would say like prisoners of this film when I'm watching it. Like I'm stuck here. I can't.
You have to watch it.
Yeah, I have to do it. Because like I mean, it's one of those things like you start watching. It's not like this isn't a movie I could just like walk away from because it's still done very well. So it's not like I can be like, okay, I'm uninterested in this plot now. I'm going to leave, which I will do in movies.
Right.
This one I can't so subverted into it because like it looks amazing, and the acting is done very well.
Yeah, gotta love Jake Gyllenhaal. It's been a while since I feel like I've seen a movie with him in it. Now to watch two back to back, I can't
Let's
get
go watch
enough.
Prince of Persia whenever you want, man.
Yeah. And
Oh
then
my God, that exists. Oh my God.
We talked about
Why
this.
does that exist?
We talked about this. You haven't seen Nightcrawler, have you?
No, I haven't yet.
You gotta check that out. That's another great
end of watch too. So really
Yeah, you can't. I can't even tell you how many times people are like, "Oh, you're into film. You really gotta watch this movie." And like, "Oh, I really don't think you actually want my opinion on your favorite movie."
Have you seen October Sky?
I love that movie.
It's a great
Yeah,
Jake
I
Gyllenhaal
fucking
movie.
love
It's
that
amazing
movie. Yeah.
I remember that movie pre-Awakening, so
Okay.
I have very. Rosy.
I would actually. That would be a fun movie. I think.
Yeah,
to talk
I haven't
about.
seen it in so long. I used to watch it all the time when I was younger,
Yeah,
dude.
I have it on VHS. I still have it.
I remember going back and be like, "Oh my god, that's Donnie Darko."
Yeah, that's an I think an incredibly underrated, forgotten film that Jake Gyllenhaal did.
Donnie Darko.
No,
No, that's definitely not forgotten or
it
underrated.
feels like everyone knows that movie is like, oh, it has such a cult following. It just has a following now.
Yeah.
Stop calling it a cult following. Everyone knows that movie is now. But no, October Sky. Everyone should check that one out. So yeah, moving on. Do we want to get into the look of this film? Because I think it's kind of important to have kind of maybe like a thread kind of run through all these of kind of the look, and maybe we can tie it into other Denis Villeneuve films as we go forward, and we'll refer back to these ones. And we did Enemy previously, so maybe compared to that. I think one of the thoughts I have initially is this film doesn't have the same kind of style as far as like establishing shots. I think Enemy had it has these like big aerial shots of Toronto. It like, really sets up the scene, and it has this kind of ominous score in the background. Not that the score, I don't even think the scores between these two are much different. They're very kind of just a backdrop. They're not really influencing the scene in any way. But I do think that the cinematography, the style is a bit different. There's not these big, as far as like the establishing shot, I don't think you get that kind of wide scope of what you're seeing in this film the same way you got in Enemy.
Yeah, which I think represents like this film all takes place in a town.
I think that's a good way to kind of think of it. It's like it's maybe like a smaller scale. Yeah.
Whereas like Jake Gyllenhaal and Enemy is traveling from one end of the city to the other to live a double life or however.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting way to interpret it. I think it's probably intentional.
Yeah. And the look of the film, I think this one feels like more manufactured than like Enemy. Like this doesn't feel like this. This film feels more to me like a basic movie.
I would say it's conventionally filmed,
Yeah.
where I think Enemy takes a lot more time to, which is weird because this movie is like an hour longer than Enemy.
Yeah.
But I think the Enemy takes a lot longer to like linger on some of its scenes, despite the fact that it has a slow runtime and it's hard to that movie doesn't have a ton of time to breathe, but it's still like, I think this movie is edited and cut together a lot quicker than Enemy is.
I would agree with that, yeah.
I would say the difference, though, is that we do have significantly longer shots here in Prisoners than we ever did in Enemy. There are a few shots that they go on forever. Like the one scene where he's got the hammer and he's smashing up the sink. That one lasts over a minute when Franklin Birch is getting undressed for one of the last times, or he said he would come back later.
Right.
And then you see Keller go back into the room to continue torturing Alex, and that's also a very long shot.
Yeah.
They show the branch that was in the RV after Alex drove into the street. This just sits on there for like, it's not that long, but just to look at a branch, it's a long time.
Yeah, there's a lot more space for these types of. That's what's so crazy. What's so great about, I don't know about great, but what is strange about this film is the longest shots are very intense. There's another one actually when the Birches come home and we know that Bob Taylor had been through the house
Right.
while Eliza was there, and it's all from them coming in the house, walking up the stairs and looking around for her, and then so there's a lot of tension in these long shots, which is why you don't really notice that they are so long versus where, you know, it's not like the Green Knight where we're just focusing on an image that kind of shimmers or moves.
Right.
Whereas there's all of this drama and we don't want to look away like a car accident.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way to put it. And yeah, I think this Denis Villeneuve, I think is while this is like a genre film where I think Enemy was much more unconventional, and these are two different kinds of films, but it's nice to recognize kind of the differences between them, and some stuff that works well in others and doesn't work well compared to another one. And I think as we keep moving forward to these, you'll establish kind of other things he does well. 'Cause like we're going to talk about Sicario later, and that has like amazing action scenes in it, which is amazing to me that this guy can move between something like Enemy, which is like this very kind of cerebral exploration of the subconscious. And then you get a drug fueled, shootout at the Mexican border in Sicario. And so, and I think that this movie is a stepping stone to that. This is like a really big feature length film that he, got to release in the U.S. And like that's kind of what I think this film launched him more in the U.S. than Enemy did. And so while I don't think that the narrative of this is entirely interesting, I just think the characters and the performances are amazing. And it's cool to see like a director get that stuff out of an actor, and I think so. There's some cool things to talk about in this, and I think we're going to focus more on the characters because just the narrative in general is something we're all familiar with. While it is tragic, and it's something we can all relate to because it doesn't matter if you have kids or not. We all have people in our lives that it would matter if they disappeared.
Oh yeah, I mean,
like
if someone kidnapped my dog,
yeah.
beyond, dude.
Or I mean, you have a niece also.
Yeah.
I do believe I do have humans in my life, but they are a secondary concern.
Like, yeah,
it's number one.
I mean, the animals, I feel like sometimes they're extensions of ourselves. They're almost like animal projections.
Yeah. But I mean,
rather than our anima projections. And that's all the Jung I have to bring to this episode.
I think so. I think that's probably about right. But I mean, like I have 5 nieces and a nephew, and if one of them, if anything happened to them, it would be devastating to me. So I think this is subject matter that we can all empathize with, and I think that's what kind of is able to draw you into this story. While the narrative itself is not like overly compelling, it's still like something I think you can attach on to and like feel for. But yeah, I think with that, we just get into the characters. I want to talk mostly, I think the 2 main characters in this are Loki and Detective Loki, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, and Keller Dover, portrayed by Hugh Jackman. And I think there's an interesting dynamic between those 2 characters because, like I said, I think this movie kind of, between those 2, they blur the lines between morality, legality, and ethics. Mm-hmm. Like what is permissible. And at what point is it permissible to like achieve the goal of like solving this case? And I like this idea of Denis Villeneuve said it in an interview. It's a cowboy versus sheriff. So you have Hugh Jackman's Keller Dover is the cowboy, and Detective Loki is the sheriff. And I think depending on how you view the protagonist of this film, the other one is the antagonist. So I guess I want to know if Calvin, if you think of Loki as the protagonist, like how do you think Keller is like opposing him on that?
So I think what's interesting is this film is, it doesn't say a lot, but what it does say is it has this overarching theme of systems, of institutions. So especially as we regard animals. So it's mentioned at the beginning he's reciting the Lord's Prayer, and then they shoot and kill the deer. Mm-hmm. There's this all being God, but he's created a system of trouble and affliction. So you have these oppositions, this were of animals trapped in cages, trapped in mazes, and we are trapped in institutions. So you have the institution of God, of the church. You have the institution of the state. Loki is really interesting in that he also has a Masonic ring.
He's like a Freemason ring on.
Yeah. So
which a little fun fact, that was all Jake Gyllenhaal's idea.
Yep.
Like the ring and then the tattoos he has, those are all just things he wanted to bring to the character. And Calvin had mentioned it in our Enemy review where he talked about like Denis Villeneuve being an auteur, but he's still willing to kind of take on ideas that maybe his actors have and maybe kind of work them into his film if he thinks they work. And I think that's just an example of, Jake Gyllenhaal just had this idea and he was like, you know what, that kind of fits the vision of my film. And describing him as the final author of this film, it's kind of nice that he was able to work kind of those little pen strokes into his his signature at the end.
Yeah, exactly. And it also reinforces the idea of Loki being an institution or part of the institution, and then you have him in direct conflict with Keller, who when gas dries up and the grocery stores don't have food, it's everyone turns on each other. So that's his idea of
all that stands between you and being dead is you.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
So the individual within the system, and so that's where all of exactly what you're saying, like why they're in such direct conflict with each other is because they represent diametrically opposite ideas of how society works, of how the world works, and how we go about achieving the goals that we want.
What do you think about their conflict, Jaden?
I think it's hard. It's hard to clarify one of them as an antagonist or one of them as a protagonist. And they both are still ultimately going after the same goal, which is for the greater good. One of them obviously goes about it in a very different way. That's like pushing the lines of like what's right and wrong. And I mean, as far as I'm concerned, way oversteps it. But I don't think that they are working necessarily against each other, despite the fact that that Loki follows him for some time. Because they're still, once again, going after the same end goal. And the antagonist is supposedly the woman at the end. But
I think, but it's like...
That's what I'm saying. It's like it's hard. It's the
there's
same
so
way I
much
felt.
drama before that leads up to her, but it's like I think there's so much drama between these two characters before then that like leads to that.
I mean, there's a lot of drama to him. I felt kind of the same way in Enemy. It's like I don't think there's actually a clear protagonist or antagonist. I feel the same way about this because like there's definitely certain points where Hugh Jackman makes me feel like I fucking don't like this dude.
Yeah, I think they're two tough characters to watch because they're both stepping over these lines. Where I think Hugh Jackman, where he abducts Alex because he thinks he's the one who's kidnapped his child, and he's crossing all these lines. Yeah. But then you also have Loki, who is going around. I mean, he's entering into like every opportunity he gets. Like it's like nonstop. He can't help himself.
See, to me, it's like his actions are things that blur the line. Is where Hugh Jackman crosses it completely.
I guess it depends on the perspective you have, because I mean, if you look at it from like a legal perspective, he's breaking the law. Like,
and none of the things that he would discover would be permissible in court.
Exactly.
So it's not like he's even accomplishing anything.
I think the only one you could describe as blurring the line is when he's going to the priest's house and he sees him passed out.
Yeah,
I think you could have probable cause to be like, I thought he was dead.
Yeah,
so you break in, and then ultimately he turns that into a way to investigate the house, which is kind of.
I mean, I'm just speaking morally.
Sketchy, but yeah. No, I get what you're saying. Yeah. But that's why I think that these two characters mirror each other really well, is because they're both willing to cross the line just in a different fashion. Mm-hmm. And again, it's to achieve the same goal. That's why I think it's interesting to think of them as kind of these like these juxtaposed characters who are inherently kind of working against each other, because if they just came together, would probably accomplish more, or if one of them just backed off, then one of them might achieve their goal much easier. Yeah,
if like one of them just let the other dude do his job.
Which is kind of actually, I don't think they would have. If you think about it, I think the plot is set up in such a way that if they weren't both doing exactly what they were doing, they wouldn't have found them.
Yeah, see, that's a.
On my second time, I was like, he didn't need to abduct Alex. Like, oh no, he needed to abduct Alex for him to put all the pieces together, because the only thing that, even with Bob Taylor getting found out, all that they would have found is the maybe the corpse with the necklace.
Yeah,
right.
That's the only connection, but it's still a dead end. We still don't get back to what's her name, Holly Jones. We can't make that connection still.
That's fair. It's an odd way how I guess you're right. It's an odd way how they somehow these two opposing forces somehow tie together to like resolve the film.
Yeah, but without like, that's one of the things I don't understand about this film is it doesn't make a moral judgment about either one of them.
It kind of doesn't, especially at the end where Loki is talking to Keller's wife. And he's like, what's going to happen if you find my husband? He's like, probably go to jail. But then that's like never resolved either. Like, there's kind of like a lot of...
Yeah, but she's like, he did what he had to do.
Yeah.
Like,
that's
a pretty fucked up thing to say. Like that.
I think that's wrong.
Yeah. I think there's another scene, and I kind of want to get into these more powerful scenes, like more later, but there's a part where they have Alex in that kind of torture chamber.
The confession booth.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's what I like. God, there's so much.
That's a terrifying way to put it.
Well, yeah, that's literally the whole
Yeah.
all of Keller is meant to it's religious institution. Like he's becoming a part of the institution. Like he mentions how he hopes that someone is looking out for Joy the way that Franklin is looking out, and he keeps praying to God, and his institutions keep failing him, and yet he's turning into the institution to by mirroring the Catholic confession booth in order to torture someone in order to get what he wants.
Right.
It's weird how he combines the idea of the institution with his approach to being an individual in order to inflict the most pain and affliction he can.
Right. And I think like an interesting part of that scene is Franklin's he wants to kind of break the thing open and let Alex out. And it's not till his wife Nancy's she's like, leave it alone.
Yeah.
She's like, we're not going to stop Keller, but we're also not going to help him. And I also kind of like that dynamic between Franklin and Nancy, because it shows that like you have a really like loving, like warm fatherly figure, and it's kind of juxtaposed by a more dominant, mother character, which I think is not something you see in film very often. It's like, because he kind of stands down as soon as Nancy's like, stop, like let it go. And I think that's like a cool kind of dynamic you don't see in a lot of film.
Yeah.
I do like too the way they treated the fact that the Birches are black. I think that we need more representation in film where we're not making it the point, oh, they're black, and we're not harping on the relations of them being different. They're just people.
Yeah, they just went over for Thanksgiving dinner, and that's it.
Yeah, and
that was
they're
the
very
extent of the relationship.
Yeah, they're very
like
normal. Like obviously there are stories that need to be told about race relations and about people with different experiences. But I loved how this was very much like there weren't even like casual jokes thrown about them being racist, which I thought was I thought that was in really good taste. It was like these are just people, and they're all on the same level.
I like what you said. It's nice to establish like a family like this that is not like it's not the point. The point is not like they are black and they are it's not like, oh, let's go see our like our friends who live in an impoverished neighborhood, or let's bring our
they're not built on stereotypes at all. They break all conventions of what we would consider black stereotypes or black representation in media.
It's nice to see like, let's see an established well-to-do black family, and it's not odd. Like let's just, and it wasn't like, oh, let's invite them over to our house for Thanksgiving because we have a better house than them. It was like they went to their house, and I think that's nice. I agree with you. It's nice to have that kind of convention of let's kind of play up the difference in socioeconomic status. It's nice to just have a good story where you can just have friends who are people of color, and they can interact together. And I think it's done well in this. I think that's a good point to bring up.
The Lions are playing on the TV during Thanksgiving.
I did see that.
Okay.
I thought it was nice because it is Thanksgiving.
I noticed that. I was like, it better be fucking Detroit or Dallas, dude.
I thought that too.
Yeah, I was like, thank God they did it right. I think Viola Davis does a really good job in this movie. Her acting in the scene where she hands Jake Gyllenhaal the photo of her daughter.
I like that a lot too. Yeah.
So it's like, so she's very subtle in it, but you can see when the camera gets to her while Jake Gyllenhaal is walking up to her, she's very worried, and she has all this like crazy, like I think emotion going on. And then since Loki speaks to her, she kind of throws that away because she has a task that she has to perform to help her daughter now. And I think just like in her subtle mannerisms, like she displayed that perfectly in that scene, I think.
I'm glad you say that, because I think that whole interaction where, because Loki goes to the Franklin's house, like their house first.
Yeah.
And he has the interaction with Nancy, and I love that where she's like, these are not good pictures my husband gave you. She's like, you can see Joy's eyes better in each picture. And I love that, like you said, it's like she throws that away, and she's very concise and clear on what she can do to help. Mm-hmm. And then Loki has a different interaction with Grace Dover, where she's concerned about the polygraph. And then it's almost like she has a kind of a hopeful feeling, kind of like, that everyone's going to think we're crazy when they just like come out of hiding. Like,
well, it's because she can't cope with it. That's why she starts doing drugs and drinking. And
I think that's
stuff.
I think that's like an interesting scene to set up kind of how everyone's going to start dealing with this. Where I think, like you said, Viola Davis, she starts out like very goal oriented.
Yep.
And then I think that bleeds over later on to when she's like, hey, let Keller do what he has to do because that will achieve our goal.
Yeah.
And then you get to Grace, who kind of is starting to lose it. And then you get to Keller, who is like very aggressive and upset about the whole thing because he can't understand. Like, I love how Loki, he's like almost like apathetic. He's like, listen, sir, we're doing our job. Just let me do my job. He doesn't seem like overly concerned with the case itself.
He's concerned with solving it.
Yeah. But I think you see as the movie goes on, that's not really how he feels. Like he's very involved in the film, in solving the case. He's very like even emotionally involved in it.
Yeah, I think it's not that he's not involved in the case. He's that he just doesn't care about Keller's opinion. He sees more of what he's done. He understands that his perspective is one that isn't clouded by emotional judgment right now, and it's thinking straight. Like we're exploring all possibilities. So quit being an ass right now.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I just think that when he first comes across, so when you're first introduced to Loki, he's having, I mean, it's Thanksgiving. He's having Thanksgiving dinner at a Chinese restaurant by himself in the middle of the rain. This is a guy who clearly doesn't have a social life, family life. He doesn't have friends that he cares about. Like he's, I think, so engrossed in his job that it's not a big deal to him to be out having Thanksgiving meal at a Chinese restaurant. And as soon as the call comes in that so this is after the two girls have disappeared, and he gets the call about the RV, and he just immediately answers it and goes. It's like he is his job. Like that's who he is as a person. Yeah. He is engrossed in this job as being a detective. And I just like that it's sort of initially portrayed as maybe like apathy, and then later on gets very emotional when like this case seems to kind of unravel in front of him and he can't solve it. He thinks he's like lost all of his leads, and then later on he figures it out. But I kind of like that sort of conclusion to his character, where it's like he's, as a parent, I think listening to him, you'd be like, dude, you just don't care, which I think is portrayed really well in that scene. Yeah. And then you see like his emotion later on, where he's just like, he gets really upset with like his police captain. He's like, I wanted you to hold Alex for one more day. Yeah. And he gets, there's a couple scenes where he's like dogging on his captain. And it's kind of amazing how there's like clearly like the power dynamic should lie with the captain. But Loki has all the power in that relationship, which is, I think, is really interesting because he's like this. I think Keller refers to him as he's like, you're the shit hot detective. Figure it out. Like, I think it's really good. So I want to talk about Loki maybe in that trickster archetype, and I think it's a little on the nose that they literally name him Loki. So if you kind of broaden your maybe description of what a trickster is. It's a rule breaker, sometimes through like malicious means to achieve a positive outcome, which I think is a really poignant way to put Loki's character in this. And that's kind of why I think the name Detective Loki is like really on the nose, because he does. I mean, he's constantly breaking rules and he's pretty brutal to the suspects of this case. He's like overly aggressive and very physical with them. It kind of drives one of them to kill himself. Like this is not a likable character, but I think he kind of fits part of that trickster archetype where he's like, he is a rule breaker, but it's eventually to like a positive end. And so I wonder what you guys think of that. Do you think it's like too much on the nose? Like, do you think he fits that? Do you think he, maybe not like your more traditional trickster archetype, but do you think he fits some part of that?
I think so, and I think it's like less on the nose. Like his name is less on the nose, and just like his subtle actions and like who his character is, like his posture and his knuckle tattoos, and he doesn't wear a seatbelt, and all this stuff is like he's supposed to be this. I'm the edgy detective, and I do things that are wrong to get the job done. Yeah, and it's just very. It's pretty boring, if you ask me.
No, I get that. No.
Yeah, and I'd say too, what Loki seems to represent here for me is I don't get the trickster vibe as much. I can see that's a good way of making the character and saying like, yeah, they're a rule breaker for means to an end. I felt like the name Loki was meant to evoke a pagan connotation to set him apart from Keller's more devout Christian outlook.
Okay. No, I like that take on it.
Yeah, and that
juxtaposes them even more with all the kind of religious kind of connotation and background surrounding Keller.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
And it really establishes Loki as being an outsider compared to everybody else, being a loner, and obviously just having a lot of baggage growing up. Huntington Boys School and things like that. So I think the way he created the character is really interesting. I don't love the name. Like you're saying, it's not like it's saying anything that isn't already on the screen.
Yeah.
It doesn't give you any greater detail into his mind or in his symbolism or whether he means anything thematically. It's just I found it frustrating that he was named that. I kept looking for like more, because if you're going to give something like that obvious away, then obviously there's another layer because this obvious one is meant to be a breadcrumb to lead you to a deeper realization, and that never came.
Right.
I was actually frustrated by that.
I think it's about as surface level as what I said. Just kind of a basic description of kind of what a trickster is kind of all that name really means.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's still fine. And again, I think this film is a more conventional general audience film, which so you probably kind of want to spell things out more than he did in Enemy. Like, I think we maybe get caught up on like that film a little too much because we liked it so much and we're expecting kind of that same kind of cerebral experience from Denis Villeneuve. And this is not that kind of film. It's just I don't want to say it's like cookie cutter. I think as far as the genre goes, it's well done, but I still think it's still just a genre movie.
Yeah, I think it's as good as the genre can get. But yeah, I'm not a huge fan.
It's a genre movie with, I think, really powerful performances in it, and leading into that, I think one of the performances scenes I like really enjoy in this, or maybe not enjoy, but I'm really captured by, is all the stuff with Hugh Jackman and Paul Dano. Is amazing. Like it must be really tough to watch this as a parent, and it's like Jaden said earlier, it's like, what would you do in those circumstances? Like, how far would you go? And it's just like all like the torture chamber stuff, and then like when he has the hammer and he's banging away at the sink, smashes the hammer in front of Paul Dano's face, Alex.
Yeah,
it's like I think those elevate this movie probably to a level it shouldn't really be at.
Yeah, it didn't necessarily earn.
I just think it's like the performances and like the
right. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
It's like the performances. They're not. They take the subject matter above what it's really giving us to experience.
Yep. Yeah, and I was listening to an interview with Hugh Jackman, and he was saying I think what he's talking about is the scene with the where he's punching Alex and he's just going over and over again, like, tell me where they are. And he was like, yeah, he's like, we had done the take a couple times and we finally, I think, really got it. And I was like, yeah, that was a great take. I'm ready to be done with this. And Denis Villeneuve came to him. He's like, okay, I'm ready for you to go there now. You have to actually do the scene now. I'm ready for you to get there. And he's like, Hugh Jackman's like, I thought I was there. He's like, Denis Villeneuve was like, nope, I need you to get there. And so they do the take one more time, and that's the one that ends up in the film. So I think it's kind of amazing, like when these directors can like elevate a performance out of an actor, and which in turn elevates the movie kind of above what the subject matter really is, like what you said. So I agree with that. I don't know. I think these scenes are really tough to get through, especially I'm assuming parents have a tougher time getting through this than I do. While I do love my nieces and nephew, I am assuming there's another level of struggle with kind of, what line will you cross as a parent? But I still think those scenes are really tough, like, to watch, and they're really well done.
Yeah, super difficult to watch. Pauly D does a great job acting in them.
Pauly D.
He doesn't have like much dialogue or anything like that. Like, once again, it's all body language almost. And I mean, even when it's just him looking through the fucking hole.
Yeah.
Wall, I'm like, how is it an eyebrow, half a cheek, and an eye?
Compelling
It's
on the
so
screen.
good.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
Yeah, I think he does a great job. And I mean, I have struggles with Hugh Jackman in those scenes just because, like, I hear angry Hugh Jackman and think of the Wolverine. It's like, I mean, that's not fair to him. And
no, it's not.
Because he's acting and he's doing his job, and I don't think he's doing it poorly. It's just like, that's a narrative that's been set in my mind. It's like, you made 9 of those movies over 17 years. Like I'm going to see you as that a lot.
We talked about kind of Matt Damon and how he's perceived in the collective unconscious in Interstellar. I think you could probably run into that same problem with this film because everyone knows who Hugh Jackman is and they know the movies he's in.
Yeah,
and so it might be tough to separate kind of those things. For me, when I watched this, I separated those, and I saw a dad just like desperate to figure out and solve this mystery and get his daughter back.
Yeah. I think.
No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say that. Yeah, I think that Wolverine started my awareness of Hugh Jackman, but he exists in my mind as Tom.
Yeah.
And in The Fountain.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's really, for me, that movie resonates so much on a personal level that I don't really care, no matter how many Wolverine movies I've seen. That's the one that resides within me.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even like throughout the whole film. It's just literally the only points when it reminds you of is when he raises his voice.
Yeah, and he gets that nice raspy cry.
I'm like, oh, okay. There's
Logan. Yeah. He even talks about that in an interview because he was, I think during the Toronto Film Festival when I watched this panel that he was on, he was also kind of in the middle of working on Days of Future Past.
Yeah.
So he's literally still like in Wolverine mode.
Movie,
yeah.
So.
Oh, I was about to say I haven't heard of that movie. A movie even with Hugh Jackman.
X-Men Days of Future Past. Days of Future Past would be a good name for like an actual movie.
Yeah, like something that might be
that might even be a good name for The Fountain. But
oh my gosh,
holy crap, you're so right. But yeah, so I mean, he still has like that character within him, I guess. I don't ever think but I understand what you're saying. You have that in your mind.
And like I try to not like that's not something. I mean, it's not something I want to watch the movie and I want to watch him as his character. It just is something that's been drilled into my brain like my entire life. Like
yeah. One thing too that I find is really driven into my mind as well is the Dark Knight. Where is she?
Yeah.
And like any movie that has anything remotely like that. That's all I
hear. Yeah.
That's all I hear too. It's like,
right.
I feel like that's something you should stay away from because it's like, it's like akin to saying, I am your father. Like in like a very non-ironic, like serious tone. Like you're still going to think like Darth Vader, like that's why you wouldn't say that line.
Yeah. There's literally a trailer of like, what's that movie coming out with Hugh Jackman? Some kind of weird
Reminiscence
dreamscape movie. And he literally says, where is she?
Yeah.
The trailer. I'm like, I fucking will never watch this. I feel like
because of it. That looks like a terrible Inception ripoff.
Yeah, it does.
But speaking on I think another emotional scene with Hugh Jackman, which I actually think is better than the scenes he has with Paul Dano. He's heading to his apartment to torture Alex more.
Yeah.
And that's when Loki's tracking him. And this is what I think of. If you view one as the protagonist, the other must be the antagonist. So if you think that
in these scenes, I agree with you.
Right.
If you think of Keller as the protagonist about to kind of carry out justice on who he thinks has stolen his child, well then Loki is the antagonist following him, and he gets caught. Keller goes to the liquor store to kind of cover his tracks, and then Keller goes to the car and he's like, "Why are you following me?" And Loki tells him to get in the car, and I think there's an incredible emotional scene there. Where Keller's like screaming, he's like, "Find my daughter," and I think that scene resonates more with me as far as like the core of Keller's character, more than the like torture scenes.
The torture scenes are not the core of Keller's character at all. That's him breaking outside of like what he thinks is right, or like that's not who he is.
Right.
It's like when he says the line earlier in the movie, it's like, in those moments, it's the only thing standing between you and death is you.
Right.
And in his brain right now, the only thing standing between his daughter and death is him.
Right.
So he has to do everything that he possibly can.
And see, I think the film is saying that that's who he is. I think like he's listening to the radio and a preacher is talking about how humans are born to this world into trouble and affliction. We weren't born in as man, but as sinful man. And this is just the logical conclusion of someone even as devout or holy or good as Keller living in a world like this. They're going to turn into this because that is their nature.
Yep.
And so that's what I find. This film is frustrating for that reason. It's still just like, it's just bleakness for the sake of bleakness.
Right, and I think you can even see that in like the kind of the way the cinematography is. It's a lot of like grays, blacks, browns. There's a lot of, well, I think I don't know if I mentioned earlier, it feels like trees are a big emphasis in this, and the opening shot is on trees as they're hunting. There's a zoom on a tree when they're at the Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah.
It feels like
There's a zoom on the branch after they remove it from the RV when they're investigating.
Yeah.
it. He hits a tree with the fucking RV. Like,
it just feels like, but they're all like these autumn or like coming on winter trees with no leaves, which is kind of thematically like a bleak feel to it. It's like this is kind of the time of year where everything's dead, and it's like kind of it sets the tone. I think I don't know that it's like. Maybe it's on purpose. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I thought like trees somehow like were very purposeful in a lot of these shots.
Yeah, especially in the Birch's front lawn. The way that I don't know if they set this up for the filming or whether the house is set up this way, but they have like floodlights at the base of every tree. I thought that was just a really cool look. Whether or not that's what they meant to film, I might, if I had trees that big in my front yard, I'd probably light them that way because it's just a really cool aesthetic.
I think it's the same way. Not spoiling the end, but when Loki shows up to was it Holly's house? He pulls up and there's like 3 trees in the back and they're all lit up, and you can. That's why it like stuck out to me that you can see these trees. It's the middle of the night, but they're lit. And so I think that's another, again, that just kind of adds to, I think it's maybe supposed to expose the bleakness of this kind of whole situation they're in. Is like these are kind of essentially they look like dead trees. This is not a time of year where you're hopeful. It's not spring. You're not excited about new life. It's they're in a very bleak situation. I think like the cinematography is supposed to kind of play that up.
yeah, I mean, even audibly, like when they're searching through the forest, like to find her, and all you just the whole time just leaves crunching and crunching and crunching because there's just piles of them.
Yeah, the sound design is very minimalistic in terms of musical score and very heavy on sound effects.
Yeah, I think when Loki goes to investigate the RV that Alex is in, he has it parked outside a gas station, and it's just like it's almost all you hear is just rain. There's maybe some like thunder crackling in the background, but it's like the whole sound design is kind of revolved around just the sound of rain. There's like I think there's a lot of like nature tones in this, and it's.
I think the loudest tone is windshield wipers. You hear it multiple times.
Yeah, especially at the end. I might get to that scene later. So before we move into the end, I want to establish some of our, I think, more clear antagonists. So one of them is Bob.
I guess is an antagonist.
How is he not, Calvin?
Honestly, I misinterpreted a couple things the first time I watched this, and on my second watch, I was like, "Wow, this is actually way less interesting than I thought it was." I didn't catch at the end that she says, "I forgot all about Bobby Taylor."
Yeah.
I thought they were in cahoots. I thought he was a patsy. I thought he was literally supposed to be a fall guy, and that's why he killed himself. That makes so much more sense of why he's in this movie at all. Because otherwise, he's just like you were saying, like an SVU character. Like he's just meant to pull the audience around by their nose into the next, like, oh, this is the new suspect. He doesn't mean anything.
Oh, he showed up at the memorial site and he's acting strange and runs away.
Yeah, he's petting a little doll. I'm like, oh, that's insidious.
And the detective just happens to catch him and they look each other in the eye.
That's why I think this movie isn't really about detective work or uncovering the mystery of this kidnapping. I don't think that's what this movie is about at all.
But we're manufacturing intrigue that didn't need to be manufactured by including Bob.
Really? Okay.
I mean, because the thing is like he's not connected with them. I thought he was actually connected with them too, which would make sense why he's going and stealing the clothes. But he's literally just following the news and play acting like the kills that his father would have done.
Why the fuck does he have toes full of snakes?
Because that's cinematic.
And that's
it looks
what is
cool on screen.
Yeah,
that's why.
Probably what
terrible.
Yeah, that's probably what his dad or whatever Father Jones, or husband Jones, whatever you want to call him, the corpse guy, did, and he's just mimicking all of the things that he saw
Yeah,
as
that's
a
why he's
kid.
drawing the maze that's on his necklace everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's misleading in a really unfortunate and annoying. I also thought that at one point that I misinterpreted what Joy said when she woke up. When she woke up on the hospital, she looked at Keller and she was like, "You were there." And then it cuts to memories of them getting abducted.
Yeah.
I thought that was Keller
Me
in
too.
the hood. And then I also thought that it was what's her face, Grace picking grabbing Joy in the last scene. It's not. I thought all of that was like, because I thought that's why Grace then was concerned about the polygraphs,
Yeah, it makes sense.
It makes sense about like why of all of those things. Like, it doesn't make sense why they would have done anything, but it would have made this film a little bit more interesting.
That's why
all she meant was like, you were at the house, I saw you, and I read way too much into it, and
I'm kind of thankful. I'm a simple man. I knew exactly what was going on in those scenes. I was like, okay, no, I get it.
Well, I
because
thought,
it was just that Keller had visited the house that they
Yeah.
were being held in.
yeah, well, I was
like,
so
okay, I get
confused
that.
by that montage though, because
Yeah.
it looked like it was
I
trying to
understood.
show them like
yeah,
something
understood.
else.
Like very quick after Killer takes off, and he's like, he leaves. Like, oh, he's going to what's her face's house. But like, yeah, at first I was like, oh, did he fucking do it? Sweet.
yeah,
That's what I thought.
yeah, exactly.
Like, why would he kidnap Alex? Is that all a farce? What's going on?
And that would have made so much more sense with the source material of the Telltale Heart.
Yeah.
Everything that we had seen so far. His idea of Alex choking the dog on the leash. That all could be manufactured as his interpretation of or explanation to someone else of why he did all of the things that he did is because he's an unreliable narrator, because he's a crazy person who has locked someone in a torture chamber confession booth in a rundown apartment bathtub. And so we can then start to unravel this mind of this person that's really just a sadist. But that's not what ends up happening. It's very confusing to me then that's like ultimately what it is.
Yeah, I think you were. Yeah,
Well, like
that-
why
in that- in that-
question
They're looking
Keller?
for more than what
Yeah.
you're supposed
Well,
to.
we
in this
kept
movie.
questioning Keller the whole time.
Yeah.
Like they were like, did he just hear what you wanted to hear? And I was like, okay, Telltale Heart.
Yeah, no,
That's the whole-
I think I'm out of all of us. I'm probably just the best at understanding film. So Calvin, after this, we'll have a little tutor session. I'll go over this with you, and it's fine. We can figure it out.
I'll consult Carl.
Friend of the podcast, Carl.
Yeah. See what he has to say about maybe some shadow self animus projection. I'm sure there's some phallic mother things that I'm missing here.
But speaking more on Bob, I love the scene where Loki confronts him at his house, and he's like, "Oh, you're at the mall today." He's like, "Do you get anything?" He's like, "Oh, some suits." And he's like, "Yeah, you look kind of run down." He's like, "Not all of us can buy suits from Brook Brothers." And then Loki starts laughing, and it's like kind of like to me, it's like a genuine like, "Are you kidding me, man?" Like, he's like, "You were buying children's clothes," and then that's again another part where Loki's blurring this line where he just busts in the house. He has no probable cause to do anything like that. But I still think it lines up with his character really well.
Yeah, because he's still morally correct. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
stuff.
or like
What if the kids are in there?
Yeah,
Like, he may
means-
not be able to solve the mystery or whatever, or solve the case, but he can save their lives, and that's kind of the reason why he does these things without waiting for the proper permission.
I like the part where he is, like you brought up, he's bust opening these like pelican cases, these chests, and all the snakes pop out, and you can tell he's like afraid, kind of disgusted by it, but he continues to bust them open because you don't know, maybe one of them's in there, maybe there's. So I just think another kind of little character moments he has, which I assume is just Jake Gyllenhaal doing this, is he like blinks really deliberately.
Yeah, it's
all the time.
he called it an eye twitch. I watched an interview. He did. He made this when he was reading the script before he even like started acting in the movie. He's like, I want him. He said, to be a detective, you have to have the mind of a serial killer, but also the one who wants to stop it. And he's like, so I wanted to act kind of like crazy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I kind of get that.
Yeah, and I think you get to the sense that he maybe had drug problems or a psychotic break
Something like that,
as like
yeah.
a young kid, like obviously being in Huntington Boys School.
So he has like
He's
shitty
has,
worn out tattoos. And,
Right.
Yeah, he's got a really weird past that creates this kind of mystique about him.
I get annoyed because I do that like when I get really annoyed or upset. Like someone will say something to me, and I just keep like blinking like that, and I saw it in the movie, and I was like, oh my god, is that what I look like? That's insane.
That's funny.
But I realize I tend to do that sometimes. It's like, okay, I need to stop that idiosyncrasy I have within myself. So
It's funny that you say that because Jake actually says the same thing about like sometimes he has that urge still, like, or whenever that interview was done, it was after the film, but he said he would still find himself like all of a sudden it was just like a tick, like, and he said it was really difficult to think of all of these different personas that you create and how they kind of become a part of you. And I just thought that was interesting. I think that's like why he is so good, is because he really embodies not just a mind state, but also this somatic expression of
Right.
what a character is.
I think the kind of culmination of a lot of his kind of maybe tics and stuff is when he Keller leaves the hospital after they found Joy, and he drives his truck over like a median or something like that, trying to get
He
to the
just
street. He just goes four wheeling.
yeah, like not even like a median, like it's just a straight up like sidewalk. Like that whole thing is landscaped.
Yeah. And then Loki's like, he's like, I know where you're going, and he just starts blinking like crazy.
Yeah.
Like I think that's the scene where he's like, okay, I've got this figured out. And he's like really psycho about it. Like,
Yeah.
because I think in that part you can really see like a lot of those kind of like tics come out.
Or when Bob kills himself.
Right. Yeah. And so I want to get into that because I think that's when this movie really, I would describe this movie as having a very deliberate pace throughout it. I don't think it's slow. I think it very wisely chooses where it's going to put its tension points to keep the audience involved. But then it still has like kind of lulls between it, but it still has like good beats in between. I think this is the part where it all kind of comes together, and Loki is like, he thinks he's kind of failed on Anna, and that's when he has like the kind of breakdown where he's like smashing his desk and he's kind of losing it. And I think that's kind of where it all ramps up. And this is the part where I think kind of all the detective work is kind of played out, because I don't think that detective work is very important in this film. He starts realizing all these clues all of a sudden. Like he has a note in his notepad about someone coming into the Keller house. And at first, Grace is the one who tells him, she's like, are you going to write this down?
Yeah. Oh, and like what's really interesting about the notepad, if you notice, like it's actually the same handwriting as Adam Bell's.
Well, it's probably just Jake Gyllenhaal's handwriting.
Are you being serious, or are you?
Pretty sure he's being facetious.
Yeah, because it's all Jake Gyllenhaal.
Okay. I don't know. I wonder if maybe
Another movie with Jake Gyllenhaal and handwriting is Zodiac. Handwriting's a big part in that one.
Yeah,
And whether you can change it naturally or not.
that's a really good movie too.
I do like that
I
one.
haven't seen that pre-Awakening, so
But I do like that. I don't like. That's the wrong way to put it. He does have callbacks to like kind of all these like maybe kind of clues that he didn't quite get at first, and then all of a sudden he's getting all of them. Like he goes back to the Keller house and he finds the missing sock because earlier Keller had seen one of the socks from Bob's evidence that had blood all over, and he identifies it, so they think Anna's dead. But then he finds the other sock just missing outside. It's just like kind of all this stuff just kind of happens all at once. All the detective work is just immediately solved.
Yeah.
And now he knows what's going on. And again, I don't think that's the point of this movie. I just think it's really played out. I guess I would tend to agree with Jaden. That's like an SVU episode where it's just like all of a sudden it's just like it's solved.
Dun dun.
Yeah.
And it's also the same way that they tie up Bob's character as well. By killing himself.
Just get rid of him real quick.
Yeah, like exactly.
We're done.
There's no reason for him to even kill himself.
Or be in the movie.
Yeah, exactly. If he didn't do anything, there's no reason to have killed himself. We already find out that he doesn't. Then we find out he didn't do anything anyways.
I think he just because he's playing out these kidnappings and murders on his own with like mannequins and stuff. And so I think he just feels guilty by proxy. And so now that he's kind of in a way been caught, his way out is to kill himself. It's like he feels guilty for something he hasn't literally done, but he still feels guilty about it. So like I get why he went through with it, and it makes for a dramatic scene.
So
Yeah,
which
but
is fine.
I think that's what's confusing is it's meant we would get the drama out of him, out of something else. You know, it's manufactured in a way as to make it seem like the story is going somewhere. Like this is the real guy, and it doesn't end up being that way. And then to kill him is just because like, well, we kind of need a logical end to this.
I think it's more. I think all of the involvement of Bob in this movie is more to drive Loki's character. I don't even think it really has anything to do with Bob. It's just to kind of maybe, I guess, to get Loki to the point where he's more involved than he was before, because now he feels like he's closer than ever to solving the case, and then he kills himself, and now Loki is further away than he thought he was. So I think it's just more to drive his character more than it is to have like Bob as an actual a suspect, you know?
Yeah, I just feel like there are better ways that would have.
I tend to agree with that.
That would have. Yeah,
He
And
could have
again,
not been in the movie, and it would have probably played out the same to me.
Or honestly, just take away the line at the end where she says, "I forgot about Bobby Taylor."
Yeah.
Because honestly, then I would have. I came away with the film thinking that he was like meant to be the fall guy, because that makes a lot more sense with all of his other actions then.
So you're talking about the "I forgot Bobby Taylor" line. That's what Holly says, played by Melissa Leo, and I think there is an interesting dynamic to that character. Denis Villeneuve said in an interview that he thought that if she came across as too like grandmotherly or like matronly, that when there's kind of the reveal that she's the one behind all this, it would be like laughable, because why would it's essentially like Betty White kidnapping someone, like you wouldn't take that seriously.
No, yeah.
But if she's like too cold-blooded in her scenes, then
you know right
it would be
away.
obvious.
Yeah.
So
It'd be like an SVU movie.
yeah.
That's why she wears turtletnecks the whole movie to cover up her.
Although actually, it would be more like SVU.
She does wear a lot of turtlenecks.
That's the only thing she wears.
Yeah.
Yep.
Although the one thing about like SVU and like any crime drama is it's always someone that you originally cleared, and the twist at the end is unearned because you just didn't get that clue. And I don't know if that's basically the way it is here too. Like
I don't ever thought of her. Maybe I was dumb the first time I watched this movie. I didn't like suspect her.
yeah.
That was going to be that's a question I had for you guys.
I
When
definitely
you first watched
suspected.
this,
I suspected Alex. I thought that his whole mental state was a facade.
yeah,
And I was like, he's pretending to not be smart. And then like he starts getting tortured, and I'm like, okay, no one will actually resist as much just to fake something, like
right.
to fake the way he is. And then he's like, I'm not Alex. I'm like, oh shit.
I've
Yeah.
heard this
It's not
described
him.
as like
and then that's when I'm like, it's got to be the lady, right? That's kind of when I figured it out. Yeah.
I keep hearing this described, even by the actors involved. They describe it as like a whodunit movie, which is like, I mean, I guess that's true. I just don't think there's enough who's to figure out who done it.
Yeah,
So-
or to care. I mean, the other thing is too is like he tries to kill himself when he drives into the tree, right? Which would make sense why Bob tried to kill himself.
Exactly.
Like,
So that's what
you got to tie up all the loose ends.
It's been implanted into their brains, because both of them are obviously not mentally stable or capable as like a normal person.
Yep.
So it'd be, especially because if you had them since they were young, you can put this into their brain. You get caught, fucking kill yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's another reason I'm just disappointed by the whole Bob Taylor thing.
Yeah, I was hoping for him to. I do like especially the interrogation scene where he's
Yeah.
nervously doing all the mazes, and I was like, I agree with you. I was hoping that played into like a bigger thing, and I do think that's a pretty dramatic. I was into that scene when it happened where he gets the gun off the one cop, and
Yeah.
I was totally involved in that scene, and I think it's well done. I just wish his character amounted to more.
Yeah.
So I guess we can move on to Holly now, because now we know that she's like kind of she is the actual antagonist of this film. We focus more on like Keller and Loki kind of verse each other, but the real antagonist is Holly. Like, she's the one who's taking the girls away. And this is another bit that I think is just kind of it's like played out detective work when Loki gets to the house and he sees the necklace on the picture of her husband and everything. I was like, we already get it. Like, we already know what's happening. To me, that's just another bit. It's like, hey, you don't need to have this in there. What do you guys think of the whole when Hugh Jackman confronts Holly? Kind of one of the thoughts I have with that scene is, I think that for a more typical version of this movie, he would get his just desserts, and he would confront her and he would win. Yeah, and like, he's gonna save his daughter. And I like the way they do that in this movie. Is like, he just immediately gets a gun pulled on him, and he loses. He's lost that
quickly. It's just done. And like, the thing is, like, so I watched that, I'm like, man, you have like a bag of tools. Like, as soon as she opens that door, just fuck her up. Yeah. But at the same time, he's trying to play off the facade. It's like, hey, I'm here to help you, and he's like trying to learn more and all this stuff, and all of a sudden, boom, there's a gun on him. So I was like, this is probably like what would actually happen.
Yeah, I like that sort of subversion of this is the dad hero who's going to come in and save his daughter, and that is immediately taken away from him, which kind of I think it lets the arrow to that scene it kind of knocks the wind out of you in a way where you're like, oh, like I really thought that we were going to get a good ending to this. Yeah, and you're like, absolutely not.
No. Then she says that line after she like makes him get in the hole. It's like, I'm gonna fucking murder your daughter right in front of you. It's like, oh my god.
I love what she says. She's like, taking children is a war we wage against God. Yeah. She's like, turns men into demons like you. And I mean, and that is, while I think it's a good line, it's literally spelling out Keller's character in that movie. Yeah. Because he's become a demon. Like,
he's become just as bad as her. He did he probably did worse to Alex than she ever did.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you were talking about comparing Loki and Keller. And I think the more mirrored characters are actually Holly and Keller. I think they're the exact same, because they are both very devout. They have this idea of how the world works, and then when it doesn't conform to how they thought it would, then they go batshit crazy.
That's a really... Yeah, no, I had never thought of it that way.
And that's the whole thing, like, why, we're born into trouble and affliction, and for that, we get cast to hell.
I think we're just set up as an audience to understand your heroes and your villains, and so when that's like not, again, this isn't like a really hard film to follow, but this is not set up as these are your heroes and this is your villain, like, because your heroes in this movie don't act like heroes in any way. I wouldn't describe them that way. And so it's tough to see your villain and your hero aligned so easily. Like you said, I mean, they're essentially like you said, the same character. They have these convictions and they're willing to follow through. And as soon as that kind of steps outside of it, they step over the line. And that's why it's hard to kind of look at this film as who's good and who's bad, because even the good guys are bad in this.
Yeah, and they both lead the police right by the person that they're torturing.
Right. Oh my God. Yeah, you're so right. There's so many parallels between them. Yeah. I didn't think about any of that.
Yeah, but the only problem is like when we realize there's no antagonist or protagonist, there's also not a message. Like, none of it means anything. Like, it's not even like that the point is bleakness and sadness, because it still feels like the plot is above any type of meaning. I find this film so strange in that you've set up all of these themes and symbols, like the idea of animals all throughout the film. You have the deer getting shot at the beginning, and then when you have Loki in the diner talking to the waitress about how she's a monkey and her boss is a rooster, yeah. And you have the venison, you have stuffed animals. When
there's even like a little rabbit on the sock that Anna has.
Yep. And that's also, if you notice, that's actually, it looked like it was either a mouse or a rabbit. That was what Bob was like petting at the vigil.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so the stuffed animals, because that's what Nancy brings when she shows Alex, like this was her, it's this idea of like this is a child represented as one of the animals. They're still innocent. They're not a part of the machine to be slaughtered. And talking about like the conversation between Eliza and Ralph, when they first found the...
we haven't even talked about Ralph. That's the kid from 13 Reasons Why.
Oh,
I don't know if you recognize
I've never
that.
seen that now.
I was like, I recognize the face, but yeah, he's pointless in this.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. I he's like big from that.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my god, I didn't even realize he was in this movie. Yeah.
Yeah, and then when the girls are looking at the rat and
the
mouse,
hamster.
it has a really long tail.
Does
I
it?
thought
That's a gerbil then.
it was bigger than a gerbil.
They must have little nebby tails.
Huh?
No, gerbils
Hamsters
long-
hamsters have
okay.
nubby tails.
I don't know anything about rodents.
Yeah, so a rodent. Well, yeah, we'll just agree. Rodent
Right.
in the cage, and again another as so. We're all animals. We're equated with animals throughout all of the film, and we're all born into this system, and that's basically all it has to say.
Right.
It's very frustrating that it has a lot it could say in 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
We could have taken Bob out and actually made a film that meant something or tried to say something, some social commentary, some bleakness about religion or atheism or anything, and we don't get anything.
Yeah, I think we could have talked a lot more about Enemy, which is the episode we did before this, and that movie is an hour
Less.
shorter.
Yeah.
What?
And so it is odd to see a director, we know that in his hands a really compelling film can come out. I don't think this is not compelling. I just think it's not as thought-provoking. So it is odd to see this. So I just want to get to there's a scene at the end that I think is just done really well. I think it's Loki's found Anna. He's driving her to the hospital, and I think this is a really good culmination of kind of sound design. It's like Jane had mentioned earlier, the windshield wipers, you hear them thumping, hear the rain, hitting against the windshield, against the car. Loki's driving, and the car is swerving between lanes because he's been shot, he's losing blood.
It's hitting in his eyes as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the score starts to build throughout that whole scene. The frame becomes much more blurry because I think it's supposed to like portray like Loki's sort of starting to lose consciousness, trying to get
Or depth perception.
Yeah.
Is kind of what I thought.
I thought so too because the blood is like going in his eyeball.
yeah.
But either way,
It can be whatever. I just think
he's
that's
impaired.
I think it's a good culmination kind of the story. I think this whole narrative has been building to rescue Anna, and I think like that's a good culmination of that. If I can give this movie a good bit of praise, I think that it's spent about 2 hours trying to build to this, and I think its payoff is pretty good. I like that final scene. It's not the final scene of the movie, but I like this. It's kind of the final scene it's the conclusion of the Anna mystery, like rescuing her, and I think it's done really well. And it's much different than any scene we see in Enemy, so it's cool to see that Denis Villeneuve can move outside of kind of your more psychological film and kind of film a really good sort of action scene, and not necessarily action in the way there's guns and everything flying everywhere or bullets shooting. I just think it's a well done scene. I really liked it.
Yeah, for all of his gun waving, I don't think Loki actually ever shot a gun.
I don't think he does either.
No.
He pulls it out on Bob a couple times. He has it out on Bob when Bob has the gun.
Oh, he puts it away in his holster before he hops the fence when he's chasing Bob and pulls it right back out. I was like, he's smart. He's not gonna shoot himself.
Yeah, no, I like that.
Yeah.
It's just little continuity stuff
Yeah.
like that because like I was in the military. I've handled weapons. Like you don't just go waving them around.
Yeah.
Like muzzle discipline and trigger discipline is a big deal. That you get taught, and I'm sure he was. If you were a police officer, you'd be taught that too. So it's just little stuff like that.
Yeah, I like that.
I really like that.
I noticed. I was like, "Ooh, that's nice." Because like I would like probably be like, look at it, take me a minute. I'd be like, "Oh shit, I probably shouldn't hop the fence with this gun in my hand."
Actually,
Like,
I love this scene just right after that. He's like looking up at the treehouse, and Bob just jumps on him.
Yeah.
And he just goes, "What the fuck?"
I kind of hope that scene was actually improv.
Yeah.
What the heck, David? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I kind of like that. Like, it just seems like that's how I would react if someone just jumped on me out of a treehouse. I really like that scene too.
Yeah, I felt like he's just like sitting there too, like, oh, we just gonna keep rolling, I guess.
Do you guys have? Oh, I didn't want to talk about. There's a scene with Grace. She is like weeping because Anna's gone, and I think that it's supposed to come off as a really powerful scene. I think it's done way better in Hereditary. Toni Collette has a scene where her daughter's passed and she's just weeping and going. She's absolutely hysterical over it. And I just don't. I don't know why this scene doesn't land for me because it should. It should matter.
Is this where she blames Keller?
Yeah, she's like, I thought I was safe with you. And
yeah. No, I think she's just fucked up.
Yeah, sorry, we just didn't talk about Grace at all.
Yeah, because I don't care about her.
Yeah, I think you're kind of right. She doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I thought she meant more in my first interpretation.
Yeah, I think if you want to see a really good, like visceral weeping scene, go and watch Hereditary and see Toni Collette. She's
and then you'll find
superb in that film.
And then you'll find yourself in your own visceral weeping when you actually finish the movie.
That movie is insane to me.
So good.
So we about ready to wrap this one up, I think.
I'd say so.
All right. Oh, no, there is one bit. I want to talk about, so the crime's been solved. They're now looking for Keller.
Oh, okay, yeah, I want to talk about this too.
Because Keller was also abducted by Holly. Yep. All right, tell me what you think, Jaden.
Okay, so this has got to be the worst police work that I have ever seen in any movie of all time. Okay, so not only did this chick not long ago, Holly or whatever her name is, back the car up, remove the cover, and then put him in there after shooting him. So that means that, like, A, there's evidence that car was just turned on and pulled back and forth. There's no way there's not. B, you can probably tell that cover was just removed and put back on. That engine is warm. That car is going to be warm immediately. There's no way you're not checking that as a cop. It's like one of the first things when you arrive at the scene.
When they're digging stuff, I think it's days after.
That's what I'm saying, is that that should have been discovered long before that scene ever even happened.
Okay. I was like, well,
that should have been like one of the first things. Like,
well, yeah, but he's more concerned with getting Anna to the hospital.
I understand that, but then after that, they obviously go to the
probably
house.
Have backup. Yeah, okay, that's a fair point.
Yeah, and like it's just annoying to me, and like that's just like, it seems like just like a low level of intellect just to drive this one scene where he can blow the whistle underground, and I just didn't like it.
Yeah, and I think that really is just that's one of the only other things from the Telltale Heart that they bring in. The guy goes crazy at the end because he swears that he can hear the beating of the heart still, and
I didn't know that. That's interesting. Yeah,
and he's like, he's positive that the police can hear it too, and he finally confesses, and so that's like, but it's weird how it's used here.
Yeah.
Like I don't know why you would bring that element in here when it's saying something very different.
I think I know.
Material.
To me, the reason why they have the whistle at the end is because Frank's character, he's like at the very beginning when they're having Thanksgiving dinner, he has the trumpet out. He says, in order to find a whistle, you have to whistle.
Yeah.
And the girls sing their song or whatever. And so to me, it's like, in order to find a whistle, you have to whistle. So Keller's whistling at the end so they can find him. I think it's like on the nose poetic, but it's like, it's kind of
like early enough in the film that we've kind of forgotten about it.
Yeah.
It's a fun little Easter egg on our next walkthrough. It doesn't make the film any better.
No, I agree. Now, I'm not saying like, this ties it all in, and I love this film now. Whereas like I think Enemy has it has a lot of great tie-ins at the end that make it so cohesive at the end, and it really enhances that film. The ending of this is not that. I'm just saying it was just a fun thing that I was like, yeah, you said like an Easter egg, like, oh yeah, because he brought up the whistle thing and now he's whistling to be found, which they had said earlier. So that was like, yeah, that's my last bit. I'm ready to wrap this one up.
All right. So ratings of this guy.
I don't want to give it whistles because I just
do not want to give it whistles either. All right. So my rating on this is going to be a little bit different just because like if I eat something with like mustard on it, like I don't like mustard. If I'm going to like rate on how good of a food it is, I'm going to try and take that aspect out of there.
Yeah.
Like it's probably still good even though I don't like it.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way I feel about this movie because I don't like crime movies.
Okay, yeah.
And like I understand like you're saying like that's not really the point of the movie, which it's not, but that's
what the setting is.
Yeah, that's what I see when I watch it. And so I gave this one a 5.9 out of 10. Jake Gyllenhaal knuckle tattoos. I just like it's good, but like no matter what, I just cannot give it a passing grade. I just don't think it's that.
Yeah.
It's not good enough for me to actually like. It's doesn't fit my palate.
I think it's tough to rate this one, especially after we had done Enemy a week earlier, and so like I said, it's tough to watch this after you know what this director is capable of.
Yeah.
and
Well,
like,
and
you
I
know
think
the
that's-
story he can have,
And
you
that's
know?
interesting too, because we all of the films that we're gonna do, other than Dune, he wasn't a writer on any of them, but he did on his earlier films.
Right.
So, yeah, it's interesting, like how you tell a story with the camera and how much more you can add to a screenplay. And I do feel like
He actually literally says that in an interview. They were like, how difficult was it to do this movie? He was like, I literally just was trying to do what was on the screenplay. He was like, my goal was just to get the actors to emote in the way that the screenplay wanted.
that makes so much more sense, and
Yeah.
it makes so much more sense when you're talking about what he was doing with Enemy. That's a lot of high-minded camera work, positioning, symbolism, and I think he came into this like, this script is good enough. And I mean, for the budget, for the money it made,
The notoriety he'll get from it, yeah.
yeah. I think it worked in his favor, but I think it is a weak film to talk about in like an auteur series like this. It's not like we talked about like a little bit of the things that he does, but it's not like he used the camera to elevate the story. He just basically gave us what was probably the gist of the short story.
So this is a product, not a piece of art.
Yeah, and
Yeah, that's no, I agree with that.
and
I think it's a very well acted, emotional work product,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's not on the same kind of level as Enemy is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't want to be the one that where Jaden keeps rating things lower than I.
Oh, you got to do it. You got to follow your heart, man.
Because I don't know, like there's plenty of things to like. There's plenty of good things here, especially Hugh Jackman, especially Jake Gyllenhaal. And I think it's still an enjoyable film, so I'll give it 6.1. Gyllenhaal,
Wow.
knuckle tattoos.
Okay, that's pretty good.
It's better than any SVU episode I've
Yeah.
ever seen.
So it's the best SVU episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the 2-hour special
Yeah.
series finale, except the series finales are always just garbage. So this is the pilot.
There's series finales in those shows? I didn't realize that they ended.
Oh, some of them do.
Oh.
With season
So
finales.
they can.
Oh, yeah, it's the season.
No, series finales.
Wait, those show. Okay,
yeah.
now I didn't. Okay, now I'm on the same boat Jaden is. I didn't know they end.
They gotta get their spin-offs.
Okay, fair enough.
CSI only has like 11 seasons.
Only 11.
Yeah.
Jesus
Yeah.
Christ.
It's way
And then
too
what,
many.
CSI Miami has 12.
Yeah, in the CSI cinematic universe, like
The CSI CM.
yeah, exactly.
Or-
CSI. Soon it's gonna be like CSI East Coast and
There's too many
CSI
C's.
West Coast.
I got lost in the sauce, man.
Shooting at the wrong boat here.
Yeah, so I think that this is a good movie and it's carried by the actors in it. It's not carried by amazing filmmaking, I don't think. I just think Hugh Jackman is amazing in this. I think Paul Dano especially is like,
Yeah, I think he's the best.
he's like he captures this really good character who is virtually says nothing, and it's just like you just there's an interview with Hugh Jackman where he says he kind of just disappears when he's on the set, and you're looking into his eyes and you're trying to get something out of him the same way the audience is trying to get something out of him. He just won't give it to you. You just can't figure out what's going on with him, and that's got to be a pretty, I don't know, incredible talent in an actor. Whereas like other actors are trying to be like, come on, man, give me something, like, and that's got to amp up like the tension for the actors in the scene as well. Be like, oh, come on, like, I'm
That's
trying
his
to get there.
character's
Yeah.
goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think he's good in it. I really, really like Jake Gyllenhaal in this. I know you think he's kind of
It's not that I don't like Jake Gyllenhaal's like acting. I just don't like his.
I think you think he's like ramped up as like bad boy
Yeah.
cop, you know, and that's fair. I still like him a lot. I think he's got like enough like quirks, and I think he's altruistic in a way, but in this like really dark, distorted way, and I kind of like that about his character. But yeah, this is not like Denis Villeneuve's best film to me by any means, and I would put it at a 6. So Calvin is officially the person who is.
We were all right around the same ballpark, though.
I was, to be fair, I had it rated a 6 from the get go. You decided to say 6.1. We could have been tied, but you put the 0.1 on it.
It's just crazy. Like I feel like you had so many like good things to say and not so many negative things.
He passed it, dude.
I
like, barely failed it at 5.9.
Everything I like about this is the characters. Like that's all I like. But I think this movie is too long, and that is like that's part of what if I have to drag this thing down a bit, that's what got me.
I mean, I literally was
is
rolling my eyes towards the end, like, come on, I'm over this.
This movie is at least a half an hour too long.
Yeah.
It's like a whole Bob Taylor too long.
Yeah, I would say just about that.
Yeah.
One whole Bob Taylor.
All right.
If he would just took care of business before the movie was shot. You know?
Yeah. All right. With that, I think we're wrapping this up. I'm your host, Connor. I'm my co-host, Jaden. And our former guest, Calvin.
Thanks for having me back.
All right. And we are on Spotify. We're on SoundCloud. We're on Audible. You can catch us on YouTube. We're on Apple Podcasts now. You can catch us anywhere you want to hear your podcast. So please give us a listen. We're everywhere.
Yeah, look us up on social media. And we love to chat with you guys.
We got Facebook. We got Instagram. We got all of it.
Yeah, we got all of it. Comment. I mean, we're going to have some polls coming up about what movies we should be watching in the next couple of weeks and stuff. So, yeah, let us know.
Yeah.
Soon we'll see you in your dreams.
Yeah. All right. And thank you for listening to Now This Is Podcasting.